1. Present day. Salvatore Della Porta slid his rectangular Gucci eyeglasses higher up the bridge of his Roman nose and allowed the irritated voice on the other end of the phone to ramble on. The commissioner of the Venice Biennale had been complaining for 5 minutes without a single pause. Della Porta combed his fingers through his salt and pepper hair, parted to the side and brushed back with the slightest amount of hair tonic. Though not a classically handsome man, he was keenly aware that looks could be improved with an appropriate fashion sense and proper grooming techniques.
"You and your pathetic hubris probably cut attendance in half,"
the commissioner screamed into Della Porta's ear. The man's Italian was flawless, but his Swiss accent and heavy-handed cadence made him sound like a dubbed version of a dopey cartoon dog.
"It has nothing to do with hubris, signore,"
Della Porta said in Italian, maintaining an even keel.
"Then what? Enlighten me." "With all due respect, you may have been a bigwig in Basel, but you're unfamiliar with certain sensitivities here in Venice."
The braggadocio continued to berate him for declining an interview with the London Times art critic, but his voice trailed off to a place that hovered behind Della Porta's ears. Switching the call to speakerphone, Della Porta stepped over to a bookshelf where rows of long-cherished manuscripts made their home. He traced his finger through a layer of dust on the shelf and made a mental note to reprimand the cleaning crew. This office was his home, and in this case, truly a palace. He glanced about the spacious room, bedecked with early Baroque-era furniture, 19th-century seascapes, and a collection of antique telescopes, sextants, and compasses that would make historians dizzy with glee. Of course, one would expect nothing less in the office of the director of the famed Musei Civici di Venezia, an august foundation of 11 museums in Venice. His workspace was the beating heart of the Palazzo Ducale, or Doge's Palace, the foundation's touristic highlight and cultural crowning star. Della Porta turned his attention out the window to the Venetian lagoon. Hundreds of vessels of all sizes entered or departed the city in a fluid tapestry.
"This used to be the seat of government for the wealthiest maritime power in the world," he thought. "Now it's a museum for tourists."
He sneered at a cruise ship. Needing to take control of this conversation, Della Porta sat at his desk and picked up the phone's receiver.
"We have nothing to hide, but that's not the point," he said. "Lionel Benton may be a prominent art critic, but he also loves shining the spotlight on himself with his outrageous conspiracy theories. Every 2 years he attempts to damage my reputation or the Palazzo's with accusatorial nonsense that could tear down everything we built."
The commissioner's rant rose in volume as he continued. Della Porta suppressed a sigh and shut his gray eyes for a moment. At times, many times, he could not believe he held this position. He wasn't a man to dwell on the past, but would his authority be questioned so frequently had he come from more prestigious means? Raised modestly in a coastal suburb outside of Venice, he developed an early appreciation for the arts on his first school trip to the city and learned his business acumen in his teens, when he ran his father's apparel company in the summer months. His 4 younger siblings didn't inherit the ambition gene and inexplicably still lived in Chioggia. Though only 50 minutes away, he limited visits to 2 or 3 times per year, either for Christmas or to dine at his brother's trattoria, which Della Porta had bailed out financially some years back. In comparison to those whose shoulders he now brushed, his middle-class upbringing left him somewhat unrefined, a half-step above his family and schoolmates, yet a half-step out of his current circles. In situations like these, insecurities revealed themselves with less than professional manners.
"I don't care if his review castigates the Biennale and exposes the trash you think passes for art," Della Porta cut in. "If you don't like my decision, take it up with the mayor."
He slammed the phone down with a clenched hand. The skirmish would have ramifications, but Della Porta reassured himself he acted with reason. He wouldn't let an outsider jeopardize all that he wanted, no, needed, to accomplish. He'd worked too hard professionally and sacrificed too much personally to reach this point, even leaving his fiancée 20 years earlier to focus on his career. He hadn't dated since and had no regrets. As a priest is married to the church, Della Porta was married to the art of his museums, eternal art that transcended the mundane. His anger toward the commissioner and the man's fugacious taste gave him a jolt of unexpected energy. Della Porta raised his slight frame from behind the ornately chiseled desk and smoothed his custom charcoal gray wool suit before shutting down his computer and pocketing his smartphone. As it was after hours and the palazzo was devoid of visitors, he strolled the expansive hallways, passing through rooms that were time capsules of Venice's heyday, and entered the great council room, his footsteps echoing in the chamber. Still the city's largest room, it had once been the assembly hall for the senators of the Republic, and their impassioned ghosts empowered him. He groped the ever-present pendant hanging from his neck beneath his shirt. The room's air tasted of history, of centuries-old incense. The heaviness scuttled past his tongue to the far reaches of his lungs and calmed his pulse. Della Porta sat on one of the permanent red oak benches encircling the room. With the walls and ceiling covered in masterworks depicting Venetian history by Veronese, Tintoretto, Palma the Younger, and other Renaissance masters, the space never ceased to inspire him. Tintoretto's Paradise spanned the entire main wall. A somber yet groundbreaking work, the painting depicted Jesus coronating Mary as Queen of Heaven, enveloped by hundreds of adoring souls. Lining the top of the 3 other walls were portraits of the 76 Doges, the dukes who governed the Republic for 1,100 years. Della Porta gazed meekly at the artwork. All the people in the paintings seemed to mock him. "You're not the right man for the enormity of the task at hand." The rear wall held the portrait of Doge Marino Faliero, though a black shroud had been painted over his face to commemorate his brief rule. Della Porta had memorized the story at an early age. The traitorous duke was decapitated after an unsuccessful coup d'etat. Faliero not only lost his head, but the people mutilated his body and burned many records of his existence. A chill bristled Della Porta's skin. He shook it off. Where the Duke failed, he would not. This was his time for ascension, for reviving past glory. Composing himself with 3 quick exhalations, he strode toward Paradise. "Remember who you are," he whispered. When he arrived at the wall, he crouched, reached under a seat, and twisted the lever that unlocked the hidden door.